There we are. Okay, let's start.
Excellent. Thank you everyone for coming along to this recorded session and welcome to the training for reviewers. My name's Andrew Unwin and I'm the Community Knowledge Manager on the InFrame project, and I'm joined today by Joulie, who's one of our leadership developers. Say hello, Joulie.
Hello, hello.
Excellent.
Okay.
So I'm going to hand over to Joulie now, and Julie's going to tell you about the different roles that will be involved in our peer review panels and our funding panel. Joulie.
Thank you, Andrew. Hello from me too. I think most of you, if not all of you, have already seen me in one way or another. There are a few roles that are involved in this process. I will start with the peer reviewers and panelists who are the decision makers in the process. And then there are the co-chairs that regulate the process in the moment. There are the observers who you will see a little bit and then you will not see or hear from again. And there might be an InFrame project coordinator in the room as well, and we'll talk about it a little bit later. Back to you, Andrew.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk you through a little bit about the process now. So the deadline for round 2 of this fund closed on Friday. And since then, we're preparing the applications for review by working through the redactions. That's being done by the InFrame team. The first stage of the reviewing process is the peer review process. And at peer review, we use 8 criteria. They are equally weighted, and each criterion has a threshold concept statement that if you think the application meets, you give it a pass. The next stage of the process is the funding panel. So anything that goes through the peer review stage and scores 6 passes or more comes to the funding panel. At the funding panel, we're using the same 8 criteria. At this stage, there's a little bit of weighting added. So the first 4 criteria are worth 15% each. And then the second set of 4, so criteria 5 to 8, are worth 10% each. These are assessed much more like assessment criteria. So for each of the criteria, there are 3 statements for a mark of 1, 3, and 5. So that helps the people who are doing the funding panel work out what score to award for each criterion. If it fits exactly to one of the comments, then you'd give it that score. If it sits somewhere between the 2 of them, then obviously a score of 2 or 4 might be appropriate. We want to say really one thing, particularly for both the peer review and the funding panel stage, is that we want you to use the full marks range. So it's not just a case of a poor proposal gets no passes at the peer review stage and a really good proposal gets 8. You can use everything in between. So some proposals might score 2 or 3, some might score 3, 4, 5, or 6, and some really good ones might score 7 or 8. At the funding panel stage, also, same thing. Please, for each criterion, use the full range. If it's really good, give it 5. If there are areas where it could be improved, give it 1 or 2. The other thing to emphasize is that the criteria, they're all independent of each other. So if you give the first element score of a pass at the peer review stage, you assess the second one, the third one, and so on, independently of your scores that you've already given for any of the other ones. After the funding panel has met and given its scores, that list will then go forward to our project board, which includes all of our project leads. And that's the point at which the projects that will get funding will be confirmed. The project leads will look at contextual information, and they'll look at the scores that have been presented to ensure that we are awarding funding to the best projects and projects with a lot of potential to go forward and lead to change. At the peer review stage, something to go forward, something needs to score 6 passes or more, so 6 out of 8 passes. At the funding panel stage, we're looking for something to get 70% or more for it to be considered a good project, or perhaps an excellent project if you're used to undergraduate assessment criteria. We're looking for something to get 7 out of 10 or more, 70% or more, for it to be considered a good project, one that we're looking at funding. Obviously, it's up to the project board and the leads to determine exactly what gets funded. based on the information they're presented. I'm now going to hand back to Joulie, who's going to tell you a little bit more about the roles that observers will play in the process of peer review and the funding panel.
Thank you. So observers are there and not there at the same time. When you all join the call, the observers will be, of course, present with their cameras and mics on, but almost immediately in the process, the chairs will ask the observers to turn off their mics and cameras. The observers remain unseen and unheard throughout the process, and their job is to be a critical friend. They have gone through the same training as the peer reviewers and the panelists, and the reason for that is because we want them to be observing the process. They never read the applications, so they don't know the context of the applications, and that is by choice and by being advised from more experienced people. And the reason why we want observers in the room is because we want to make sure that we are doing due diligence of the process. And of course, for us, the InFrame team, it is important to also feel confident that we have helped and built the process in as fair a manner as possible. Given that some of the criteria are not the usual criteria that we judge applications and proposals on, it is important that observers be able to express that gravity has been given to certain things that are not really being assessed. Did I get that right?
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Joulie, for covering observers.
Okay.
So I'm going to talk to you a little bit more now about the role of the co-chairs. So again, living out our project values of collegial leadership, we have 2 co-chairs at each meeting. We've learnt a lot from round 1, and one change that we've made from round 1 is that co-chairs are fully independent now. So co-chairs in round 1, some of the community co-chairs also did reviewing, so that's not going to be the case for round 2. There'll be 2 co-chairs at each panel, either peer review stage or funding panel stage. And what we did very successfully last time was that split the panels in half. Co-chair 1 would lead for the first half of the meeting and coordinate discussion, ensuring that the reviewers reporting their scores, who had already reported their scores, and the discussion of the scores, ensuring that everyone had the opportunity to speak and to make their views clear, whilst co-chair number 2 is keeping an eye on the timing. We probably expect to have about 20 applications to review at each peer review panel, and we want to make sure that each application gets a similar amount of time. Obviously, the discussion will vary between each application, but we want to make sure that they get a fair consideration. So co-chair number 2 will be looking after the timing. And then halfway through the meeting, we will switch over. That'll work really nicely for this round of peer review as well, because each panel will have 2 trios of reviewers. And so we'll do those in 2 halves. So trio number 1, co-chair 1, and then we'll switch over trio number 2, co-chair 2. So the role of the co-chair is really to make sure that people get involved, have the opportunity to raise their comments, come to a fair outcome in terms of looking at where there's a little bit of divergence possibly between the scores that are reported, making sure that things around the borderline are given appropriate conversation and discussion, and then keeping things to time. So that's what the roles of the co-chair do. We've got a community co-chair for each panel, so those are volunteers like our reviewers. And then there's also a member of InFrame staff who acts as one of the other co-chairs. Julie's going to tell you a little bit more about the role of project coordinators before we come on to talking about feedback, why feedback's important, the language around feedback, and a little bit about language just to close off, because the discussion at these meetings is really important. But Joulie, project coordinators, what are they going to be doing at the meetings?
Thank you. So some of these meetings, project coordinators, InFrame project coordinators do join. And that is for helping the process if there is anything that is needed that is not accessible right away. Project coordinators have access to everything, and they also know where everything else, because they know everything really. They are our best friends, both for projects and for the InFrame team, and they do not participate in the decision making. They are there just to make sure if any support is needed in the process, that they can offer that support. And from, I think, round one, we can say that this worked really, really well, didn't it?
Yeah, I think it's probably worth me just adding in that as we're talking to you as reviewers, that we'll issue you with your applications to review and give you about a week for you to return your scores. So your scores will be submitted in advance. And one of the jobs that the project coordinators do is actually to compile all of those scores. But as Joulie says, we also have the project coordinators there at the meeting, because if there's a query or a question about a score, then the project coordinators have got all the documents, the original documents that you've submitted your score sheets to hand. So that's the other thing, and that's how when then at the meeting, one of the co-chairs or the project coordinators present will share a spreadsheet, a summary spreadsheet, and that's our agenda for the meeting. So the co-chair will walk you through that line by line, looking at the scores from each reviewer, looking at the overall score, and then making sure that the right decision is made in terms of whether from peer review something progresses, or for the funding panel, whether the score that's allocated to the application is fair and appropriate given the aims and values of the project and the assessment criteria that are being used. So thank you. That was just something I remembered. I think we wanted to cover about what people will be seeing at the meeting as reviewers.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Now, one of our straplines, one of the short phrases that we've used about the InFrame project is new ideas from new leaders. And we've encouraged people to come forward. We've encouraged people who haven't normally submitted ideas and applications like this to do so. And we've given them a lot of support to do that. The project coordinators and our community knowledge analysts have given people advice and guidance to help them with their application. But as I'm sure you can expect as reviewers, and there's no doubt as some of you are experienced reviewers, not every application can be or will be successful. Some of the applications will have been put in for various different reasons, and the feedback that they've been given, will have been put in for various different reasons, and some of those won't be successful. And we need to make sure that having encouraged people to apply, if they are unsuccessful, that we do communicate that to them in a fair and supportive and constructive manner. And this is where your role as reviewer is particularly important, particularly at the peer review stage, where if things aren't passing through peer review and the application's unsuccessful at that stage, then people get some really useful information. There's not going to be a round 3 on this project, but there might be an opportunity to resubmit in again, and we want to build people back up. So one of the reasons that we wanted more reviewers is so that each reviewer has a lighter reviewing load than they had in round 1. And that gives you the opportunity and the time to do your scoring correctly and fairly, and also to provide some feedback, to give some supportive information to applicants, particularly unsuccessful applicants, where the strengths of their proposal, looking at the different criteria, what stood out to you as being really good about the proposal? And again, often with reference to the criteria, because we find this to be the most supportive, what was missing? We might talk in shorthand about the weakness of the application, but what we're looking for in terms of feedback is areas for improvement. What could have been added? What was missing from the application, relevant and relative to the criteria, that would have made it a stronger, better application, so that somebody can go to that and say, okay, I can see why it didn't go through. I can see how I can improve it in future. And I think the other thing worth adding about feedback, of course, is that the people providing the feedback, it's not like a normal interview panel where you can get feedback from all of the panelists and then share it directly with the candidate. You as reviewers will be writing some feedback. It's going to be compiled by some members of the InFrame team, probably circulated by some different members of the InFrame team, and then potentially even later on conversations between unsuccessful applicants and other members of the InFrame team will help tease out some of the detail and meaning behind the feedback. So Julie's going to talk a little bit about the language that you can use when you're giving feedback, and also the language that you can use in discussions at the meeting, and how that can be helpful and what can be particularly helpful. But when you're writing your feedback, imagine that you are an unsuccessful applicant receiving that information. Julie's going to talk, I think, a lot about how we can be kind, how we can be supportive, but put yourselves in the seat of somebody who's been encouraged to apply, somebody who doesn't normally do this, perhaps. Some of the applications come from really experienced applicants, but some completely new. So put yourselves in the seat of the applicants and think, what information would I like to get? What information would help build me back up again? What information would help me go forwards in the future? So I'm going to hand back to Julie now for a bit more of an overview of language and language-based assumptions that we make at both the meetings and in giving feedback.
Mm-hmm. You hit the nail on the head, I would say. Someone told me, talk about the strengths and talk about the areas that can be strengthened. So it all remains within strengthening people, strengthening their work, maybe repurposing this proposal into a different type of funding, since we don't have a round 3, sadly. So I think language has also been covered in session 1 quite extensively, in fact, with the different types of activities, pardon me, that we asked you to do. Language is important exactly because it can carry the conscious part where we want you to strengthen people. It also can carry unconscious bias. And we have talked about this and how we can be conscious that this might be a reality without not doing due diligence. So it can be, again, within a positive context. As Andrew said, our directive is be kind. Be the kind of reviewer that if you are deciding between a 1 and a 2 and you're unsure, prefer the 2. Also, be encouraged that you are one of 3 people that is making that decision, and together with the other 2, you can probably make a better decision of how you want to score an application. And definitely make sure that your kindness doesn't blind you to giving everyone a pass, because we are quite aware that quality is a factor, and quality of each of our criteria is a factor. We have gone through the criteria in session 1. Remember that these criteria you still are asked to assess on. Be kind, don't be blind. Assumptions again come with the bias, and apart from making sure that you are watching your biases, you have done your best to make sure that you're not judging applications based on the quality of language. Remember that these are very diverse groups of people that come forward. A lot of them, like myself, are not first language speakers. We will not sound as first language or native speakers, and this isn't the goal. The goal is not for all of us to sound the same. The goal is for our ideas to thrive. Is there something that I haven't covered?
No, I think that's good. I think the one thing I just wanted to pick up, given the audience that we have for this recording, I'm very grateful, of course, that people have come in. Some of you have been involved in round 1. Some of you have come in through our invitations from some of our project leads to take part. And I know that many of you are very experienced, either very experienced in your career or very experienced as reviewers. A bit like all of the criteria being equal and independent, particularly in the peer review stage. All of you as reviewers are equal and independent. We're really grateful that you're coming with all of your experience. But again, like some of our applicants, some of our reviewers are new. They've all been through a similar training, and we want to make sure that everyone has equal and fair voice. And that is also important to us in terms of assumptions. So whilst you may draw, and you might find it very useful to draw on your previous experiences of panels and communicating your views, This isn't a panel of experts. We're not a bunch of physical chemists talking about particular physical chemistry proposals. We are a bunch of peer reviewers, particularly at the first stage. And so we want everyone to feel that they have equal voice and that people don't use their experience to perhaps silence the views of the less experienced reviewer. We want to build up the confidence and experience of new reviewers alongside experienced reviewers. So I think that's really all we wanted to say to close about languages and assumptions. I'm going to close with our goodbyes now. I really want to thank you for volunteering. Some of you may have been voluntold, some of you may have been encouraged strongly to participate. Really
Everybody
grateful.
wanted to be there, that's all I know.
Everyone, we are very grateful that you've come to do this, and it's really working out well in terms of looking at the reviewing process. I'm really grateful to my colleagues in the leadership development team, Joulie, who's on the call today, and Dawn, who I think you'll have met in the other session or the part of this session that this video's in terms of their flexibility and reactiveness to helping recruit some additional reviewers and the training required. So thank you very much, Joulie, for doing this recording with me. Thank you very much, folks, for listening to this and engaging with the rest of the session. And in advance, thank you very much for your reviews and your kind and considerate feedback to our applicants. Thank you.
Thank you.